if Mike Murphy and Peter Daxel could come to the stage for just a second. We have a small gift from EIMA for both of you, for Mike for your years of service and former leadership as president, and Peter as the outgoing president. We have Scotty Cameron putters for each of you.
Wow.
Mike, yours is the taller one, so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peter, thanks for all your help and for your leadership.
Well done. Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Would you like me to say a few?
Yeah, please say a few words.
I was joking. Let's get to the guys here. Yeah.
So thanks to both of you for your leadership over the years with the EIMA Board of Directors. Now, welcome back, everyone. We're ready for our panel discussion on advancing and selling the best ever wall cladding. Moderating our panel will be Albert Carillo, who's the CEO of the Western Wall and Ceiling Contractors Association. He'll introduce the members of the panel, and I'll turn it over to him to moderate. So take it away, Albert.
Thank you very much. Well, thank all of you. I got to say, it was a pleasure to get the invite to moderate this. I learned one valuable thing is the panelists get to sit and the moderator gets to stand, so I'll be up here uncomfortably walking around in between all the comments. My name's Albert Carillo. I have a career in the construction industry. Started out as a plasterer. Then I went on to be a plastering contractor. And then I got hired by a big company called Drive It. And I spent 12 years there, 12 great years. And I used to tell the architects when I go out to talk to them, I know how to install it, I know how to lose money doing it, I know how to make money selling it. So I learned the whole gamut of being in the EIFS industry. Advancing and selling the best ever wall cladding, we kind of live those words. In my opinion, I also write a small column for a great magazine called Walls and Ceilings, and I get a lot of feedback sometimes because I call EIFS one of the best claddings there is for the money. I mean, bar none, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, there is not another cladding out there that has been tested more, that performs better, and everything we all know. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I firmly believe and I stand behind this industry that we have that's called EIFS. And my second battle will be getting the moniker EIFS out of there, but then that's a whole nother story. We'll get to that later. So I want to introduce our esteemed panelists here. First is Chris Benedict. So Chris Benedict is a registered architect. She has 30 years of professional experience. Her office, Chris Benedict RA, was founded in 1995. And they specialize in the design of exceptionally energy efficient buildings. A leader of the passive house movement in the United States, Chris has designed over 80 apartment buildings in New York City, and including 3 recently completed apartment buildings that are in New York City, designed to meet the passive house standards. She has another 15 passive house buildings on the boards, and they're all designed to cost the same as typical construction. Now, Chris is a graduate of the Cooper Union, where she was inducted into the Cooper Union Hall of Fame. Chris teaches internationally about her groundbreaking work and is a thought leader in the building industry. And she's in the center. Then over here to her right is Phil Neff. Phil Neff is the Vice President of Sales for Manning Materials, and he resides in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And this marks the start of his 30th year with Manning Materials. Yeah, Manning Materials has been a distributor for Drive It for 47 years. They cover half the state of Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey and Delaware. The product lines include Nudura insulated concrete forms and Tremco sealants and waterproofing. And then rounding up the group is Mike Cheney. So he's a lifelong resident of Chesterfield County, Virginia. He graduated the Virginia Tech with a BS in Business and Finance. He's the founder and president of James River Stucco, James River Exteriors, which was founded in 1992. James River Exteriors has a diverse portfolio that includes both residential and commercial projects in central and eastern Virginia. Their concentrations include eaves and stucco, masonry, stone, siding, and cornices, caulking, and waterproofing. air and water barriers, and sick building repairs. Mike is active with several organizations, including the Home Builders Association of Richmond, AWCI, the Virginia Masonry Association, and of course, EIMA. Starting off with our panelists, are we going to switch the, there's some bullet points coming up here. No?
Perfect.
Oh, that's okay. Starting off, our first panelist, please welcome Chris Benedict.
Hi. I'm Chris. I'm an architect, and I love EIFS. And I'm really pleased to be here to tell you about what I think about it, what I've seen over the years, the way that I talk about it or think about it, and perhaps also tell you some things about the future of EIFS. So I love EIFS because we can frost the cake with it. And when I say that, I mean that we can cover a building with EIFS, and we can get all the things we want to bring it to the highest levels of energy efficiency that we know about right now. Principally, with the EIFS strategy, we get an air barrier with our liquid applied membrane, and then we get the continuous insulation on the outside of it. These are two things that are extremely important for the new movement in the United States called Passive House. And I would suggest that all of you, wherever you live, you can seek out people in the Passive House movement, and I would suggest getting to know these people because they're the ones now that are really, really pushing large amounts of insulation that also include an air barrier and also insulation on the outside of a building. I would say one way to talk about my career is that I have spent 25 years taking insulation from the inside of a building and moving it to the outside of a building, where it's agreed in building science is the best place for the insulation to be because it can be continuous and you can not have condensation inside of your walls. Thank you. So another thing I like about EIFS is it kind of fulfills the promise that all of us who went to architecture school emulated, which is, it's a true modernist material. This is not one of my buildings. This is Villa Savoy by Corbusier, one that is highly regarded and admired, and it's got the look of shape. And shape is something that I can get with EIFS that's very hard to get with other materials that are broken up. I lost a slide there. The other thing that I like about EIFS is that you can do a lot of very different things with it. So the first project here is my first work with EIFS. This was done about 15 years ago. It's a building in the Bronx. And the building was initially going to be clad completely in a rain screen material. I was a younger architect then. Rain screen cladding was the big thing to do. We were going to have a layer of mineral wool outboard of the exterior and then cover it with rain screen cladding. But the rain screen cladding was very expensive and still is. And so what we decided to do was to offset the price of the rain screen cladding with EIFS, but try to use the EIFS in a really creative way. So what you see here is the copper is the rain screen cladding, and then the blue is the EIFS. Oh, my slides switched around, I'm sorry. You can see the transition from the EIFS to the rain screen cladding. You can get knife edges. You can do really wonderful things with it. And then that transitioned into an inner courtyard that was completely EIFS, but looks really great with stone and wood and metal. And so from here, I was inspired to say, hey, I don't need to balance EIFS with other materials. I can move ahead and I can use EIFS as a material in and of itself. One side note on this is that there was just at the end of construction, a little gunfight that took place on the corner here in front of the Blue. A bullet hole ended up being made in the building, and all I can say is thank goodness it went in the EIFS, because then it was just a little repair instead of a whole shattered piece of rain screen material. So then I wanted to really carry out being able to clad a building 100% in EIFS. And thus was born 803 Knickerbocker. This is an affordable housing building in Brooklyn. This took a lot of convincing. The city and the state were involved in the financing for this building. I had to have some of the higher echelon of Stowe come and help me defend it with the state in order to be able to do it. But the concept here was that we could be really sculptural with the material, create something really cool from a material that has been really maligned, and I love that kind of transformation. So there's still some stone on the ground floor on this building. The state insisted that that be so. But the way that this building is shaped, as the sun moves around the building, the side panels and the upper panels shade the windows in the winter, but also allow, shade the windows in the summer, but allow for sun to enter the windows in the winter. This was also a historic building in that it became the only building to be published in our current mayor's kind of strategy for energy in New York City, because I begged my client to not take any additional subsidy for this job, for energy work. And so we did this job for the same cost as typical construction, and we delivered passive house level compliance. So the city got the notion now that we could provide passive house level energy efficiency for the same price as typical construction. So this was my sell to the client. Originally the building was going to be a brick facade, a brick cavity wall. And in the meantime, we had our financial crisis. And when we came back out of the financial crisis, I knew about Passive House, but I didn't really know how to sell it yet. What it turned out to, how it turned out was that you can see the line there. I'm doing a cost comparison between what we would have to do to take that brick cavity wall building and have it become a passive house. And you can see here that the EIFS insulation, where we got a credit of $10 a square foot back, was one of the major players in being able to deliver this building to passive house compliance instead of business as usual. And this has now become kind of like a historic little chart here where people use this now to talk about, you know, how we can make improvements on business as usual in their building. So further on, I was involved with something called the Mayor's Task Force for Greening the Code in New York City. And during that time, I was able to put a measure forth that was adopted by City Council that allows us to add up to 8 inches of exterior insulation on existing buildings without what had previously been kind of had to be calculated was that that extra 8 inches would be additional square footage to the building. And in a lot of cases in New York, the buildings were built before the current zoning. They're all beyond complying right now. They have too much square footage, and you weren't able to add insulation to those buildings. So we were able to pass a new piece of the zoning allowing us to add 8 inches without any penalty for the zoning. Additionally, we were able to add up to 8 inches of insulation on new construction and not have it count as floor area, so that we could have fatter walls with more insulation and not have a penalty to the developer or owner of the building. So both of these now have been used pretty widely to get additional square footage for new construction and to be able to insulate existing buildings. So here's the next building without any other materials on the facade. This one is in Upper Manhattan. This is a market rate apartment building built to passive house standard. So on this building, we have 8 inches of foam on the outside of the building. This would be a look that would be basically unaffordable to do really in any other way than how I did it here. Behind the insulation, behind the 8 inches, is a heavy gauge metal dense glass wall, and then on top of that are 8 inches of insulation. And this is a Passive House compliant building. Another look at what that looks like. This building is an existing building that was reclad, and I want to thank Rich Sangiorgi of Elite Wall Systems, who's here, hopefully, in the room, with some of his crew, who did a beautiful job on this. This is in Queens. This is a major building owner in New York City who came to me because it wasn't because of energy. It was because there's a law about upgrading and repairing brick, and there's 6-year cycles on these brick repairs, and they own so many brick buildings that they start at one side of their portfolio, and 6 years later they're back again to the building. They wanted to stop this cycle. It's incredibly expensive. I had been doing some energy work for them, and so the very bright person in their energy unit said, why don't we take a look at actually rebranding and cladding this building and creating a new identity for our company. So this is our first stab at that. So this is an EIFS building that has between 2 and 6 inches of insulation on it. We kept the existing windows and we kept the existing air conditioner sleeves. And there's actually a nice thing that happens at the air conditioner sleeves that are, the grills are made of metal, and then we have the more dense look of the EIFS and the shine and the opaqueness of the two materials, I think, work together very nicely. This is a home I'm working on right now, a modest $15 million home in the Hamptons that is also being clad with 8 inches of EIFS. You see the base coat on here right now. Our finish is going to be evocative of the moon. And this is a new job that we just won a competition for. This is a seniors building that will be done with modular construction. So the way we're going to build this is that our first floor is going to be built with block and masonry backup, and then above there, the modules will have an EIFS finish on it, and each module will be much lighter with the EIFS finish on it, and we'll use brick slips to create the brick look of the building. And a project that I have underway right now, and one that I've been dreaming about for a lot of years, is taking some existing buildings and cladding them with EIFS, but hiding new mechanical systems underneath the skin. So you see here, our roof becomes a home base. These buildings will be built to Passive House standard. They'll be getting energy recovery ventilation systems on the roof and ductless split system heating and cooling. And the mechanical pieces will run down across the roof and down the face of the building and poke into each unit. And then we come back with the EIFS over this, which basically brings all that mechanical system inside of the thermal envelope. And so this is a groundbreaking job that we're doing right now, and we'll have a lot to report back on how this works. That's a look at some of the profiles of what the EIFS will look like, and also behind that we're hiding ducts and refrigerant lines and condensate lines. So I made 2 slides of some details that I find I'm recurring in my designs. The first one is we have existing or new parapet walls, and we're bringing the EIFS up on the other side all the way up to a knife edge, doing the pitch, and then stopping it with some flashing, and then that flashing holds a stainless steel panel here, and behind that is XPS foam, and then our roof is completely covered with XPS foam, and now we've frosted the whole cake. For the rehab that I showed you where the mechanical systems are on the outside, the way that we're doing the installation is we're getting new, fantastic, high-performance windows. They're being installed outboard of the position of the existing window. The existing window will remain in place. This window is installed. The EIFS is installed on the outside of this. We're bringing the new window lining up exactly with the outer surface of the building, and then creating our air barrier drainage plane right in that spot there, adding the EIFS, covering the mechanical systems, and then in a week or so, the mechanical system, the ductless split system head is put on the interior of the wall. The existing window is ripped out. The area where it was ripped out gets sealed, and we put a grill on the ventilation system. So something that has been occurring in my state, at least, is a big move towards panelization treatments on existing buildings. And this is actually something that I have a bone to pick with, because I think that these panelized systems are a lot of material, and it's kind of building an additional building on the outside of an existing building. I was part of a 6-group feasibility study looking at this issue, and my solution was EIFS. I think that every extra material and every hanger and every screw and every hole you make in the wall is just a long-term maintenance issue, versus EIFS that's adhesively applied and can be there for the duration without the maintenance issues. So this is what these panels are looking like. I took these pictures in the Netherlands. So they are foam. They're foam material. They have fiberglass on the outside, plywood on the other side. They're hung. And I think in some ways this is our competition. So you can do a lot of crazy things with foam, and that's another thing I really like about EIFS. You can machine it. You can CC mill it. And what I would like to do is move forward, perhaps make some changes in the way that EIFS is done right now. And so I'm just going to show you a little picture of some of the things I've been working on. So we can do wonderful things with the surface. So here's one of my buildings that I'm cladding. So my proposal is that I would create a grid on the building. We would pre-make these foam pieces. They could get splined together so that they align. If there's a pattern, it can be continuous. We don't have to sand the foam, so we don't have all the little snow flying around. It would mean if we were doing complex shapes that we have to change the base coat. I know. And so what we're planning on doing is taking this building, which is existing right now, and within the next couple years, figure out how to do exactly the same thing in EIFS on top. So I own a 3D camera. The first thing is to document it, measure it, and get it all into a piece of data that's called a point cloud. And from there, you can take the building and swirl it around and look at it and see all of its nooks and crannies. Then the little points that make up this data can get triangulated together into a mesh, and it's just a matter of how fine and how much computer you have in order to get that mesh to be the mesh that you want. And what we intend to do over the next little bit of time is to create some panels that we can put right on this wall that look just like the wall that was underneath it. So here's a look at what these could look like. They have their backs cut out also so they can fit over the ductwork and the refrigerant lines. So that's kind of for the future. This slide is about carbon I know Chris talked about carbon already, and everyone seems to be talking about carbon right now. So we all know that when we're insulating our buildings heavily, we're helping with the carbon footprint of that building. But there's a new discussion now, which is about the carbon footprint of the actual materials that we're making our buildings out of. And in that case, I think EPS foam has taken a hit because it is a foam that is made from fossil fuel. But I would like you to notice this chart here shows some of the foams, and we show mineral wool here, and we have EPS right above it. And you can see that the carbon footprint for the mineral wool and the EPS are very similar. And I think also that this carbon counting is ignoring the fact that EPS actually is carbon, and that we are actually sequestering carbon, which is the story of these items down here. So I think that once we come up with a way that is really accurate to carbon count, we may see that EPS is in a better place, although it is in a good place right now. So thank you for your attention, and I will turn over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Chris. That was very enlightening. So as you can see, we're going to have three brief talks here from each of our panelists, and then we're going to kind of open this up to have some conversations, have some questions, and audience participation is always welcome. Next up is Phil Neff from Manning Materials.
I paid them to come here. Okay, thanks. The funny thing is that Chris got up here and she was talking about how great EIFS is. I'm going to talk about the 5 design phases of architecture. So, and I'm going to apologize to you right now because she knows a lot more about it than I do. But what I want to do is try to tie it into what we do as an industry to try to recognize those phases and where do we need to be in front of people so that we can get our word out to them so that they use our products. And we've had a lot of discussions about a certain word or a certain phrase, and I'm not afraid to say it, but a lot of what we do is value engineering. And we can't be afraid of that. That doesn't mean that it's not still a great product, but we got to be honest with ourselves. If budget isn't a concern, they're going to be using other products besides us. And the great thing about it is that our product is good. It insulates, continuous insulation, weather barrier, going on and on. It's lightweight. You know, so when you said earlier that this is one of the best products out there, I'm preaching to the choir, but it absolutely is. So I also don't mind if you ask a question while I'm giving it, because I'm supposed to go a certain time frame, and I don't know if I'm going to do it. Which you guys are probably happy, because then we're drinking. But 5 phases of design. Am I going to click this, or you guys? Okay, and Chris, please speak up. I'm not going to go over the pre-design phase, and keep in mind that this is going to be, this is for what the architect goes through, but in our industry, so does the general contractor. General contractors do design build also. Some general contractors have their own architects in there, so the process is going to be relatively the same, but it's not going to be exactly the same. And it's not going to be the exact way that I'm talking about it either. It all depends on your project. The other thing that we're starting to see a lot more of out there is design assist. Do you do any of that? Design assist, where you're bringing in, you have your owner, you have your architect, you have the general contractor, the builder, and then you have one person from the subs. And what they do is they get together on a project, and the whole design phase is a collaboration. So as they're moving through the different stages, the different subs, the GC can add to that so that at the end, they get to the best possible point where the building is done well and it's affordable. But some of that is going to tie into this too. But you have the schematic design phase, you got the design development phase, construction documents, bidding. It's different for the GC than it is for the design team. And then you have construction administration. So the schematic design, this is the time when the owner and the architect get together. Very basic things are being discussed: the size, the shape of the building. You don't get into any details. If the GC's doing the design build and the architect, this is the phase where it's fun because they get to use their imagination too. But they don't really get into anything in great detail. The GC also will typically, if he's involved, the GC will go to one subcontractor for every trade. One person with every trade: HVAC, exterior, you name it, whatever trade it is. Somebody that they may trust, just so that they can hone in on the price a little bit. And I think it's important for us to know, if you're a subcontractor and you're that one person, you got to recognize what phase they are in the process. Because if you're in this phase talking to GC, there's no guarantees that you're going to get the project, as you all know. And you're spending time, you're spending money to help them out. On the flip side, I think you'd rather be that person in that arena than somebody else. So at the very least, if you're going to do this work, you can say to them, look, I know there's no guarantees, but at least give me last look or something like that. The next phase is in the design development phase. The basis of design is established. We're moving forward with this. Elevations and materials are called out with what's going to go on. Floor plans with finishes, windows, doors, plumbing, electric, HVAC are now being discussed based on what they want to accomplish with the building. There's still minimal specs and details at this stage of the game. And a GC may normally go to contract at this phase, all right? From our industry perspective that are trying to sell our products, it's very arguable, but if you get involved at this point, it's too late. Because all that work that happened in the schematic and the design development those decisions were being made. So what we have to do as an industry, we have to be in front of the architects with our products and what advantages they are to them. And you got to be in front of owners if you can. A lot more difficult to know about it at that point, but especially GCs. We need to be in front of them so that they can see products that if they get into a situation where they have to make a change for any reason at all, they know about our products. If we're not doing that, this stage could leapfrog us, and you're going to see as we go further down the line, it's too late. Construction documents. One thing I forgot to mention in the previous, this stage is where they start to talk to the engineer usually. Also, so we're starting to talk about structure, right? Our product's lightweight. The footings, the structure is important to our product. So now the architect and engineers in the construction document phase, they're finalizing all these technical aspects. The HVC is called out. All products and materials are selected. Architect starts to put out documents for doing multiple drawings for approvals that they have to go through with townships and all that good stuff. And the general contractor, if he's involved at this point, he is now going to go to probably 3 subs from every trade that he has, because he's got to start buying the contract, buying the trades. And this is where we also tend to have an interaction. When I say we, I say our industry. It could be the applicator, it could be the distributor, it could be anybody. This is where we tend to have our interactions with the architects because they're working on details, they're working on ideas. We're getting in there to make sure that we're helping them out any way that we can. The next phase is the bidding phase, and this is where it's different for the architect from the bidding. The architect might look at, this might be the part where the architect is starting to look at the bids that the GCs already gave, or they're starting to pick the GC that they want for the project. If it's design builder and the GC's already involved, this is the point where the GC's getting those choosing from those multiple subs that are out there. Who's going to do the job for them? You get requests for information, contract selection, and permits. And then you have, finally, the construction administration. From an architect standpoint, this is where you'll see them out on the job occasionally. They don't have to be I don't think you're as interactive with the project. You did most of your work already. Now you're going out there to make sure that they're following what you and the architect have decided to do. But that doesn't mean that from our standpoint, we're not out there with our clients, our customers, to make sure that they get the answers they want. God forbid if anything's wrong, which it never is, but we want to be there for answers and so forth like that. Technical questions. All right. I didn't know if I was going to put this slide first or last. Chose it towards the end. Last week, before I came down here, I met with a builder and I met with a developer. When I was talking to the builder, out of curiosity, and we were talking about what's the process when if you value engineer, he was describing it to me. And he looked at me, he goes, Phil, I'm going to tell you, all projects are over budget. So it's a good thing we got a great product to help in that situation. The other thing that he was telling me, they have a lot of work that's put into it. If they have a 2-year project out there, they have over $200,000 invested in the process. So they have a vested interest of whether that job goes forward or gets canned. Because if it gets canned, that's $200,000 that they're not going to retrieve. So what they'll do is they will talk to everybody to see, which leads me to the second quote. I was with the developer and wanted to go over details and just make sure everybody's on the same page. And he said, we want to hear if you have any products that can save us money without compromising quality. It's value engineering. But I don't know, last night we were having dinner, Rick Mengen, I think, said, let's call it performance engineering. But we can call it whatever we want because what we have for it is the best product out there. It's going to happen. They're looking for it. We need to be prepared that when we get those questions, we have the answers to help them out. And we need to get in there as early as we can. I'm preaching to the choir. I know you guys all know that, but I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Phil. So we've heard from our architect, we heard from our distributor, and now let's hear from our contractor, Mike Cheney.
Yes, I'm just Mike the contractor. So as we start off, I'd like to ask, how many subcontractors are in the room? EIFS subcontractors, raise your hand, hi. Guys, thank you for coming. We've been trying to get you guys in these meetings for years. Glad to have you I want to make sure you understand how important it is that you're here. I've been a member of this organization for a long time, and a lot of times we go to these meetings and there aren't as many contractors here as you would expect. So consider yourself special. You are, because you're here. You're taking the time to learn what's going on, and some of you are going to get some awards accordingly tomorrow night. So congratulations. Thanks for being here. Any GCs in the room? Oh, good. I can talk bad. First off, as an EIFS installer and now a mason for a dozen years and a siding installer for 20 years and stone for 25, I'm here to speak to you about the opportunities we have in our industry against some of these other claddings. And I'm going to speak somewhat slanted towards some of the other ones, but EIFS is still our baby. I mean, I've been doing this for 33 years. And it's still the product that pretty much every job we quote, as a line item option at the bottom, we're giving them, if you switched this product to EIFS, it'll save you this. And you know, somewhere in the last 12 to 15 years, when the rain screen systems came up, like Chris suggested, and Nichihai and Hardy and Swiss Pearl and Allura got ahead of the game of selling their products as rain screens with continuous insulation and blah, 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 permanent finishes, et cetera. They got ahead of us. Some of those products, honestly, and I don't know if you're aware of this, in a fully installed system with CI better than 2 inches, with Weatherberry, with the flashings, with all the reveals, the green girts, everything's going, they're $50 to $70 a square foot installed. How many of you guys in the building doing EIFS would do any EIFS finish for $50 a square foot? I mean, it's awesome. It's crazy, because the situation is there's opportunities there if you're willing to stick your head out there and think a little bit outside the box. Okay? I saw you raise your hand, Mike. I'm sorry if I offended anybody. But the question is, you know, when you quote these jobs that have a small amount of EIFS on it, do yourself a favor, bid the weather barrier. What was the first industry that came up with a rolled on, sprayed on weather barrier? It was us. From fighting through the mess, I don't need that anymore. Fighting through the messes of the 90s. The EIFS manufacturer stepped out and designed these systems that came up. They've been part of our system forever. Now all of the energy codes require exterior insulation, which is where it belongs. What have we been doing since the 60s when this stuff started? Exterior insulation. Just getting yourself on the table with that team, the way he was talking about in the design phase. If you're the air and water barrier guy and you've got, let's say you got a cornice piece out of EIFS. Well, you're sitting in the meetings and they're trying to figure out, okay, we've got to get X number of dollars out of this project. Well, now you can speak up and say, well, if you drop that masonry down 6 feet, if you got rid of those FIPON brackets that we can do at a fraction of the cost, if you tailored your flashings a little bit different and made them integral so you didn't have to have stainless steel, which is extremely expensive, you can save a lot of money. You can give the owner the confidence of a single source warranty that, you know, we tell our customers all the time, we've gotten a lot of traction in the last 2 years in picking up the entire package of the exterior of the building. We do everything but glass and roof. We'll put the weather barrier up, we'll do the waterproofing, we're ABA certified, so we'll do the air barrier stuff, we'll get the test, whatever that takes. We'll do the EIFS, we'll do the siding, we'll do the masonry, we'll do the stone. At the end of the day, I tell the owners and the GCs, 5 years down the road, now you got a leak, you're not gonna have a meeting with 7 trades, 5 of which are actually gonna show up only because you owe them money, and sit there and ask them whose problem this is and get this. Because we've all been there, every one of us. If you've been a contractor for any length of time, you've been in that triage meeting 2 years after the job is done, there's an issue, and everybody sits there with their head down and points at somebody else. Whoever the loudest jackass in the room, excuse my French ladies, which is usually me, wins. So it's really a great opportunity for us as an industry to start thinking a little bit bigger picture. With all the new finishes we've got now, when Hardy came out with that new slick panel, the shiny stuff they had, you know, we had metallic coat. Then some of the manufacturers have come up with those nice, smoother finishes that the architect said EIFS was old. The old quartz put swirl texture was old. Then all of a sudden, medium sand was old. I don't know where that happened. So now we're into the finer textures. And they look really nice. We can match pretty much color-wise and texture-wise almost any of those claddings if you're willing to take the time and stick a number out there. And if you can ever get your teeth into an architect, I wish Chris would move to Richmond, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
You could have a situation where not only are you getting more work currently, but you get yourself in a position where the architects and the owners, and occasionally the GCs, some of us are our friends, will call us on a situation where they're trying to figure some small problem out that turns into a great opportunity for us. So what I'm telling you is, if you haven't done it yet, I'm sure a lot of you do, is don't neglect the chance to get in front of it with the air and weather barrier, to put yourself on the job site so you can talk about everything else we can do, because there's gonna be pretty much, in my experience, probably 8 out of 10 jobs, it's gonna be that one screen wall on the roof they forgot to put the steel in to hold it up. Okay, we'll put the EIFS brick on it. There's gonna be a parapet cap that they totally messed up the dimensions, the steel's in place, they ordered all this precast, and guess what? Doesn't work. So you get a chance to go in there and do some work. So I think long-term, our industry, over the next few years, it's gonna depend on us as the contractors, and I'm partial because I think we guys pull the train. There's a lot of important people here from our industry. Manufacturers, distributors, chemists, smart guys, everybody's here. But let's face it, I'm talking about the envelope guy, very smart guy, obviously. We've seen Steve Brick talk. But guess what? Nobody does it without us. So stand up, take the bows you need to take, and don't be scared to stick your head out there, because there's a lot of products and opportunities for us in the industry. Thank you.
Straight from the contractor's mouth. You'll get all the honesty you want. So you heard 3 presentations coming from a design side to when to get in on the distributor side, what phase do you want to talk about EIFS, all the way down to the contractor side about what they're going to choose. And as I'm sitting and I was listening to these presentations, I kind of had a few questions, and I want to direct my first question to Chris. You had mentioned a term called EIFS strategy. And when I think of a strategy, and I imagine it's relating to Passive House, but can you kind of expand on what you meant by EIFS strategy? I love that term, by the way.
Wow, well, I'm not sure what part of my presentation I said that phrase. But,
trust me, you said it.
I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here in terms of, what EIFS is and how it's installed and all of the component pieces of it. But I guess, can you give me a little more context on that? Because
you were talking about when you have your Passive House designs and when you're moving into these buildings downtown and recladding structures, and you use your EIFS strategy when you're talking about design and performance and that type of stuff.
Well, I mean, one thing that is great for the Passive House, and I can't say it enough, and I know other people have said it too, is our ability to achieve a Passive House airtight air barrier with the liquid membranes that come de facto with the EIFS product. So even if we're doing any other kind of cladding on the outside, say mineral wool and rain screen panels, I'm still asking for, one of the EIFS manufacturer's air barrier behind it, I guess an EIFS strategy is really finding the right aesthetic look for a building, figuring out how to do it through EIFS, figuring out how to get that insulation to be completely continuous over the building, and then now I've also added in, how do we design something that we can actually hide stuff underneath and make it interior to the building, like the mechanical systems, the ductwork, and the refrigerant lines, and we're even looking at running electrical lines, and people have even asked me if they can build sprinklers into buildings by using the same kind of method that I proposed for the mechanical systems. So, I mean, in terms of an EIFS strategy, I guess it would be versus some other material that's actually harder to use, more expensive, needs more structure, and has longer term maintenance.
Thank you. And I kind of brought that up because I like the term. We talk about marketing, which is the overall theme of this panel here. When you talk about an EIFS strategy, it implies a lot. When you look up the word strategy, a plan or action or policy designed to achieve a major overall aim. And I think you hit on, we talk about, and like Chris told us earlier, our buildings, they talk to us. We got to listen to them, and they'll tell us what we need to be listening to. So I think EIFS strategy is a very good term that I'm just going to throw it out there for everybody to use. To the distributor side, when you're when you're working with these designers and these professionals, now, do you maintain a staff that's geared towards like a EIFS arrow, that where you go in and you have this crack staff, or do you do the job yourself, or if any other distributors in this room, what do you guys do? How's
Well,
personnel-wise?
yeah, but like all of you, we have employees that are sales reps, and the way that Manning looks at it, and no offense to the manufacturers, but from our standpoint, if Chris is calling Parex, Synergy, Drive It, Stowe, Masterwall in for the answers to her questions, the value's not in us. It's in the 5 manufacturers sitting in this room. So from a distribution standpoint, in my opinion, is that the value's got to be in you. So you need to know about the industry, the products, so that you can convey that value. We want them calling us. We don't want them calling anybody else, because if you call somebody else, we don't know about it unless that other person tells us. So.
Thank you. And so we take that right onto the contractor, that same kind of theme. Mike, when your staff, your foremen, your lead people, do they have an extensive education as far as EIFS go? Can they on the fly be able to take care of a detail, or do you have to go into that to help them along?
Honestly, I'll answer like most contractors. Depends on which guy's in charge, what job it is. Yeah, they have the authority to make the decision, but if anybody knows me, I'm a little bit territorial, so it usually gets run by me before it happens. But through the various EIFS Doing It Right and all those other programs that have been around for the years, we try to keep our people trained in that and just update them from the various manufacturers on different systems as we go.
You know, I know on the West Coast, a lot of these high-rise buildings that are going up, the subcontractors are increasingly doing more and more design assist. And whether that's good or not, I don't know. And some contractors even have architects employed by them. Are you seeing that happen in your neck of the woods? Is that something that's growing, or do you do it at all?
Unfortunately, you call it design assist, which is probably a politically correct term. I call it GCs and owners paying the architects less than full fare and giving it to the GC to give it to the sub and let the sub figure it out. So if it's a problem, it's his problem later on. So a lot of the design issues you're talking about makes sense, huh? So what happens is we are solving the problems in the field, because sometimes the details are not very good or nonsensical, and we're stuck trying to warrant the system. So we're out there trying to, okay, I know this is really not us. Now, James River's a little different because we do the different systems, but we also do a lot of one-offs where we'll do the masonry on a project where somebody else is doing the EIFS, or we'll do the siding on a project where somebody else is doing the EIFS. And it gets to the point where somebody's got to step up. As a contractor, I think we're good because we've been through the fight, some from the 90s, that takes the lead and tells people that won't work and here's why. As long as you're not scared to do that, then you start gaining a reputation of somebody that will do it, and it kind of makes the whole project go a lot smoother.
And so that's the end of the line situations we're dealing with. So let's move it back up to the design side, Chris. We mention GCs all the time, and they're kind of that invisible entity that plays a huge role in construction. But when you're designing a building, and let's say a GC has already been hired and you have that tripartite relationship in place, are they able to help you with the EIFS design and the process you're going through and working through details, or does it have to wait to further down the stream?
Well, I can talk about the building where the EIFS contractor who is in the room was involved with. We actually had somewhat of a little bit of a bitter struggle at the beginning because we argued over the details. But I think in the end he was right with what he was wanting. I was kind of schooled in EIFS from Canadian best practices, and the Canadian Home and Mortgage Corporation published a series of best practices books, and I bought the one on EIFS and learned about it, and understood we need to drain. And so Rich actually showed me some issues with the way that I was allowing it to drain, and showed me that caulk is critical. I don't like caulk on the exterior of a building that's exposed to UV and weather, so I was trying to avoid that, but he showed me that. So there have been times when I'm kind of the one determining, and other times when a contractor is helping me out with it, because obviously they're the ones who've had their hand on this material for many years, while I'm coming in drawing it. I'm not touching it. So in general, though, I think that what's happening in our industry, at least in larger buildings, EIFS is now kind of a new component. It's been done, for a lot of years in places that aren't very high end, and now all of a sudden it's coming into the high end where there is an architect involved. So the architects really need to get that very basic education. I mean, for me, I think one of the most basic things is the EIFS needs to drain. It needs to drain. And you don't want to put it on the ground, and there's other things that are important, but those are pretty basic things that architects need to know.
And so, Phil, when we talk about the design assistance and the helping, back to these GCs again, do you guys work with GCs yourself? Are you involved at that level, or do you primarily between the architects and the subcontractors when you're doing design assist and helping?
Yeah, there's exceptions, but it's primarily with the applicator, the customer, because he's probably got that, in with the general contractor, and our job's to assist them so that they have the information and answer the questions. But you also have relationships with general contractors too, when you're doing it for a long time, and when they're in that phase, whether it's design assist, and if they don't have a contractor involved with it, then yeah, certainly we'll get called in to answer questions with what they have.
And I know we have various product manufacturers and their reps in here too, and so we talk about brand all the time. And I just want to ask a hard question to you, Mike. Is there a particular brand that you would suggest, or is it pertaining to the representation that you're receiving or performance that you get out of a brand? Does that play into any of the decisions you make for EIFS?
As far as what material we use?
Material? They asked me to do this, not my fault.
Mike, I'll
That
buy
was a
you a beer
softball.
when we're done here.
It's the gorilla.
Actually, I have a unique perspective on that. I was 100% driving for 20 years. Then I went to Stowe for a while when my distributor got changed. And then I went searching for a new line, and I found Masterwall. And over the years, I've done Stowe, Synergy, Parex, oh my God, Finestone, even some of those crazy ones that don't exist anymore. And the one thing to answer your question is, it's who butters the bread. So if there's one distributor or one line in town that A, is bringing me leads, B, is providing a service that if I have an issue, they're showing up with somebody talented enough or smart enough to say the right things, and covers our back. So it's like any other sales thing. We are predominantly loyal to who we use most of the time, because it makes sense. If you got material left over, and if you got any gumption about you at all, you're not mixing materials, which is another short subject of mine, but at least you're creating a two-way street. If I'm using your product, you're going to likely send me some more work. So that's kind of the way it works.
Yeah, we found that, it's always a challenge to get in there, and brand specific is a very hard thing to understand. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do and get through, and even though it's the desire of all the salespeople to get that done, it's a battle we all go through, and I think it does break down to the representation in the field. And so on the design side, is this a factor at all, or do you just look at EIFS as this strategic entity that you're going to use to make your buildings efficient?
Well, I guess I've been fairly brand loyal to Stowe. That's been my go-to. I have a lot of technical assistance from them, and they've supported me also in some of the crazier things that I want to do. So I thank them. I haven't tried other brands. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't. It's just that with Stowe, I have what I need. But on the subject of manufacturers in general, I think it would be really great in addressing architects that there's a much easier way to understand all the different goops and finishes, and there's a lot of stuff that every brand has, and some of it I think is legacy stuff and some of it's new, and it would be really great to just have a listing of, well, this is this and it's for this, and this is this and it's for this, so that we can understand more how to specify things for different situations. So.
Thank you. That's what I was going for right there. All right, we got just about 10 minutes left, so I want to ask a question out of each of you, and Phil, we'll start with you. If the EIFS industry could do anything, and this is you talking, I want the EIFS industry to do this. What is your wish? Something new, different, exciting. It can be nothing.
What's that? You want to answer this
He
for
gave
me?
us some hints.
Rising tide raises all ships. Chris, you mentioned in one of your projects that you told the owner to not take the credit and you could deliver passive house level envelope at no added cost. That's like the holy grail. That's, you know, if you can do that kind of, if you can deliver that, my question is going to be, everybody wins if we can do this. How do we get passive house levels of envelope performance as minimum code? If we can do that at no extra cost, then suddenly every wall or every existing building that we're rehabbing ought to be the best piece that all of the manufacturers here have to offer.
Your question is to me about code? Well, I don't think code's going to deliver it, at least not in the form that code exists right now. But if you want to see something about code, you could look at my video, The Perfect Energy Code. It's on YouTube. Check it out. It's a proposal for a different kind of energy code.
That's fine. Yeah, we have to do something in this industry. Well, Chris, let me ask you real quick, your wish list. If EIFS industry could give you one.
Go ahead.
All
I
right.
came up with mine. Mine would be for all the other manufacturers to go out of business, so we have no competition.
Mine would be to come up with a base coat where we don't need mesh.
Very good. And Mike, I'm going to toss it to you.
And mine would be that, and everybody in the room that knows me from the various manufacturers, I've been saying this for 20 years. It's time for us to stop being second-class citizens in the industry. All the smart people, everybody, every time we hear a speaker, what do they tell you? The perfect wall, the perfect whatever. It's EIFS. All the components are there. We've been doing it for 50 years. So we need to stop taking a second seat and go tell these people, we've been here, we had an issue. Yes, we fixed the issue, but let me give you this as an aside, and this is a little bit different. I can tell you from somebody who's done the Swiss Pearls, the Nichi Highs, the Allures, the James Hardy reveal systems, large panels, whatever. That industry right now is getting ready to have the same hurricanes that we had in the 90s. Because what's happening there, the GCs are using really good residential Hardy guys to install Hardy on commercial projects. They don't understand how the reveals are supposed to be lapped. They don't know how the weather barrier is supposed to go. They just know the reveal is supposed to be silver. Well, if it's got to be silver, it's fine. Well, unfortunately, we're in the midst of doing a 72-unit condominium project that's less than 3 years old. There was a large panel cement board reveal system that we're taking down all the siding, all the reveals, the zip wall, and the insulation, and redoing it from there out. And I mean insulation between the studs because most of it's wet. In 2.5 years. So that's getting ready to come. So let's go back to telling what we do well and do it the way it ought to be, and I think we're going to be well off for the future.
Yeah, Mike, you just, that's my wish too. Right now, with the energy code the way it is and the masses trying to figure out how to put stucco over foam, we have the answer. EIFS is the answer. It is the simplest, most complex thing there is out there that answers the needs. And Chris Mathis talked about moving and creating and doing things, but when you listen, there's a quote by Leonardo da Vinci, and you'll see it in my article coming out in the magazine, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." I think EIFS falls right into that statement. So please join me in thanking this group up here, Chris Benedict, Phil Neff, and Mike Cheney, and thank you all.